everyone to this webinar for starting out as a primary SENCO by Lynn Howe. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So Lynn is an educational consultant and has over 20 years of primary teaching, senior leadership and SENCO experience. And she also runs an award-winning blog called positiveyoungmind.com. So Starting Out as a Primary SENCO is a book aimed at SENCOs who have recently started in the role or are studying and hoping to become a SENCO. If you have any questions at all, you can just pop them in the chat and I'm going to collect the questions and I will ask Lynn these questions near the end of the webinar.
Perfect, thank you. And I think there's a book up for grabs, isn't there, from Bloomsbury? I've kindly donated a book. So one of the participants today will be getting a book, and I've also got 3 webinars up for grabs as well. So Asha, at the end, if you could choose 1 book winner and 3 webinar winners, that would be great. And then you can contact me after to decide which one you would like. That would be perfect. Well, it's exciting to be here. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, I was very relieved when somebody showed up. So, so that's always good, isn't it? And yeah, I was really happy to start the book starting out as a primary SENCO. And it's been a long time coming because I had it in my head for a very, very long time. And it was like one of those things. I was like, well, I need to start this. I need to start this. Everything is in my head. And I knew it was one of those books that I wouldn't need to go off and research. And it wouldn't take me too long to get on paper because it was just all swirling round and just waiting to get out, really. And I had a chat with Abigail from Sensible SENCO, plug for Sensible SENCO if you haven't heard of them. So they're all about the nuts and bolts of SENCOing over on their Facebook group. And yeah, she encouraged me to get on and write it, and because she'd self-published and published a few different things as well. So it was her encouragement really that made me go off and do it. And then, yeah, once I had the manuscript, then it was a bit of a journey in order to get it published. But I had a finished copywritten manuscript in the end, and I sent it off to Bloomsbury, and luckily they accepted. So, yeah, very lucky to be a Bloomsbury author. So very pleased about that. And so currently I'm also SENCOing myself. I'm 1 day a week in a very, very tiny primary school in Essex. We only have 47 children at the moment. We're hoping to grow as we go on though. And even though it's only 47, I still have quite a high SEND list. I've got 11 on my list at the moment out of 47 children. So definitely keeps me busy and keeps my hand in. And it's also really, really interesting to do alongside all my freelance work. So I certainly like variety. So first of all, I'm just going to take you through the contents of the book, and then I'm going to go through some top tips of SENCOing, and then at the end we've got some Q&A time. So hope you enjoy it. So first of all then, first part of the book is all about whether you even want to be a SENCO, because I think some of the time some of the SENCO books have been all about what you do when you get the job, but actually that bit before you get the job can be quite a challenge as well. So it's going to go through the before you start, and maybe you want to go and find out and shadow some other SENCOs and find out what the role is all about, because quite often I think if you're a class teacher, you don't really know what that SENCO is doing locked away in their office. So it can be quite a mysterious pastime, I think, in schools for SENCOs, because it seems like they're, I don't know, I think sometimes teachers think that you're playing solitaire on the computer, or we might have done in the olden days, or maybe Candy Crush these days on our phones, and not actually doing anything. But obviously we know our SENCOs that we do an awful lot, and it's not always obvious to class teachers what we do. So for those people contemplating the shift from one to another, I wanted to kind of outline what the job entailed to start with as well. And also the good things about the job, because I still maintain it is the best job in the school, even though there's masses of challenges at the moment. And just going through really getting your first post, so interviews and what questions that you might be asked, and what you should expect in terms of pay and release time and qualifications. And I know as I was writing the book, when I first started writing the book, it was all about the NA SENCO, and by the time the book got to publication, I was quickly changing the information to go with the new MPQ, and it was still a little bit ambiguous at the time what that was going to look like in real terms. So I had to do a bit of changing there at the end to reflect current practices. So the next section of the book, chapter 2, goes all about the first year of being a SENCO, and it's a good idea just to consider what's gone on before in your school and sort of follow the patterns of what's happened before, and also start to create your own calendar of what you might need to do just moving forward if you repeat a year, because once you've done everything once, things become a lot easier. So this section just goes through what to do on the first day, even the first week, the first month, the first term, and the first year as well. So a lot of the things will get repeated. A lot of the things just crop up ad hoc, but ultimately it gives you kind of that timeline and that structure for your year moving forward. And then it comes into chapter 3, the everyday life of a SENCO. So things that you would be doing day to day. So there's lots of top tips on how to organise yourself, on staff training of what you might like to do in-house or what you might need to get external people to do. A bit on screening and interventions and what you want to do in terms of screening children coming into school, and also best practice in terms of interventions as well. A bit on data assessment and access arrangements as well, and also the engagement model and personalised learning for those children who can't be in a mainstream classroom full time. And also go through whole school approaches as well. And the everyday life of SENCO, I always maintain, is different depending on the culture of the school. And I haven't met any SENCO whose job is the same, because a lot of us wear a lot of different hats as well, and our contexts are so different in all the different schools we work in. But I think there's lots of common themes just in terms of workload and well-being. So that's also unpicked later on in the book as well. So chapter 4 then is all about paperwork and the graduated approach, and what the statutory requirements are in terms of paperwork at the moment, your SEND list and who should be on it, who shouldn't be on it, and who to have a massive debate about. So that's always handy, because I always consider that it's a bit of a postcode lottery, isn't it? Because I would say that some children in my school, for example, might see the list because it's a very small school, so we've got a little bit more of a bespoke way of looking at it. But like 10 miles down the road, if the same child was in a really, really busy school with 300 children with significant needs, then they might not even get a sniff at that SEND list. So it's interesting just to think in those terms of who should or shouldn't be on it, because there's not really any national guidelines to say yes or no to particular needs. And then it goes through one planning and what you can expect with that. And all the way through the book, there are QR codes that link you back to the Bloomsbury website, where all the paperwork is housed as well. So you can go back to the Bloomsbury website and get everything that's suggested in the book, all the paperwork there for free. So you can download that all as well. So it goes through one planning, a sort of a guide to how to do that and how to extract paperwork out of teachers, because that's always a challenge as well, because it ideally should be the teachers writing those one plans, particularly and IEPs, particularly in primary. And also then EHCPs and annual reviews. So what is best practice for EHCPs, a bit about the law there and having to get them, and also about how to run a really good annual review as well. And then moving on to leadership. So leadership's a bit of a challenge, because going from teacher to leader is something that a lot of SENCOs struggle with when they start the role, particularly as more recently people are becoming SENCOs with less classroom experience. So when I started to become a SENCO, like 6-7 years ago now, so I already had quite a few years of teaching experience behind me. And a lot of the SENCOs that were already in post had significant teaching experience behind them as well. So it was quite difficult back in those days to actually get that SENCO position in a school, because a lot of those people have been there a long time. But I think since the demands have changed somewhat in the last X number of years, it's just meant that that turnover of staff is getting a little bit more frequent, shall we say. So a lot of the SENCOs are in post having had less teaching experience, first of all. So if you're trying to advise people in classes who have had more teaching experience than you, for example, that can be quite daunting sometimes. But also going straight from class teacher to then line managing LSAs, for example, there's an awful lot of those leadership skills that aren't taught at the moment, but you kind of expected just to pick them up on the job. So hopeful that this book will help you with some of those skills that you didn't already have. Luckily for me, I'd come from a background of being an assistant head before being a SENCO, so some of those skills could kind of transfer over. And I think within the first school I was SENCO at, they kind of used me in an assistant head capacity as well. So I was a very underpaid SENCO for that as well, because they were definitely using me for a lot more than my remit. So So that was another issue in itself, really. Then it sort of moves on to working with parents and carers, and we know that that can be a massive challenge because there's an awful lot of difficulties for our parents at the moment as well, and getting it right is not always something that I've done either. So kind of learned from experience, learned the hard way when it comes to talking to parents and carers, but definitely building those relationships and getting them on side is a key thing. Then there's a little bit about working with families, particularly if there is children with school avoidance issues. So that can be another factor so that we can ideally support early on in order to prevent things happening later. And then just a little bit about the O word as well, a couple of pages just to outline what you might expect, some key questions that you might be asked in an inspection, and how things are changing for the better, and a little bit about my opinion about that as well. So not backwards and coming forwards when I've got opinions about Ofsted, etc. I think I've done 6 inspections now since I qualified, and they've all been very different, but there's been some common themes there as well. And then the other section, number 6, is all about wellbeing, because that's a massive thing at the moment. And of course, my Primary SENCO wellbeing group has got lots and lots of disgruntled members who also are sharing an awful lot of wellbeing issues. And it's lovely to see everybody jumping on the bandwagon there on Facebook of actually supporting each other through these difficult times, because it is difficult for everybody at the moment. So wellbeing should be paramount, and therefore there's a whole section dedicated to that. So it sort of starts with the nature of the role, and thinking about what your remit is and how much you have to do at home and how much you should set those boundaries so you don't have to do that. Moves on to sort of the workload side of things, and it's got the wellbeing workload tracker there for you to download so that you can consider how much work you actually do and just track it for a few weeks, and then go back to your senior leaders for a frank conversation about what you should be doing and why, and why you need to make sure that you are looking after yourself so you don't burn out. So again, it's all about raising that profile of SENCOing in schools, and also having a look at the BASFAR research into the SENCO workload. And I think that was done, they redid it, I think it was 2022 off the top of my head, I can't quite remember. But I'm hopeful that they might do another workload survey, because I'm pretty sure that they'll find that things have not got any better and have probably got increasingly worse. So that's also something to consider. And then just a little bit about the green paper, as well as some final words and anecdotes alongside some further reading. So in a nutshell, hopefully it's enough in that book to get you through the first year of SENCOing and beyond. And I've kind of put in the introduction that it's not only one way of doing things. I've got my version of doing things just in terms of what my experience have been, so I can sort of appreciate that it is a structure, and some of you might have different structures in different schools, and I'm sure lots of you will have much better ways of doing things than I do, for example. So it's just up to you just to go through and just take all the good bits that'll suit you and resonate with you, and then just leave all the rest, really, just like constructive criticism. So so there we go. So I hope you enjoy the book if you haven't already bought it. And if you don't win one today, hopefully this will inspire you to go and get a copy. So there we go. Okay, so the next section is just some top tips for SENCOing as well. So I've got 20 top tips for you. And the sections are organisation and workload, working with senior leaders, high quality teaching, working with parents and local authorities, and working with staff as well. And I've got written them all on a post-it in front of me, so so don't forget what they are. So top tip number 1 is setting your own boundaries. So there's always too much to do and not enough time to do it. So just making sure that you are setting clear boundaries for yourself, and do this at the beginning of the term and moving forward. And I know that whenever I do this to myself, I have really good intentions, and then by week 3 they've just all gone out the window. So if that happens to you, just kind of regroup every few weeks and just check that you're actually working towards those boundaries that you sort of set for yourself right at the beginning. Ideally, kind of write them down and attach them to your desk somewhere, or put them on a poster on the wall, just to remind yourself what you're aiming for. And if you don't quite hit them, it's always time to start again and try again the next week. So personal wellbeing boundaries are really key. So top tip number 2 is tracking your workload. So just making sure that you are aware of how much you're doing and you're not lying to yourself, as I used to do. I'd be like, well, I really enjoy my job, so I'm just going to do more of it. And I think particularly before I had children, this was something that I would definitely do, because I loved my job so much. I loved all the children, and I think my life might have been quite empty back then, really. I don't know, I think that had something to do with it. I had something to fill my time, and working till midnight was fine with me. Of course, it's not okay these days, and I think once I sort of had a family, and I know that other SENCOs, once they have other things, meaningful things in their lives, actually you do realise as you get older it is just a job, and therefore you need to track your workload carefully. And this also means that you have something concrete to take to senior leadership when you start to whinge about it, because actually it's quite easy, isn't it, to go to your senior leaders and go, oh, I've got so much to do, X, Y, and Z, and this isn't done, and I haven't got time to do this. And they're like, what do you want me to do about it? I'm busy as well. But if you actually have it in black and white on paper, actually considering what you need to do moving forward, and what do they want you to stop doing so that you can put in their new initiative that they want you to do. It's just things like that. It's just kind of provides concrete evidence for that discussion. I'd also always advocate that if you print off a timetable of what you're doing in the week and then overwrite it with a colour about what actually happened, and you'll see definitely that the two things are very different. So if you write on there, every time you've missed your lunchtime, for example, every time that you've worked late into the night, and you shouldn't be doing those things, but it's a good idea just to stop lying to yourself for one thing and have those conversations in order to get all that down in black and white, just so that you're more aware of what you're actually putting into the job. Okay, top tip number 3 is all about sharing what you do. So just making sure that, particularly in September, at the beginning of staff meetings, sort of say, this is my remit, this is your remit, and this is what we do that crosses over, because you are a coordinator, you're not a doer. So you need to make sure that everybody is clear on that. And again, staff often have no idea what you actually do, so it's probably a good idea to list those jobs and take every opportunity to shout about your role and raise your profile in school as well, and the highs and the lows. And ideally, your leadership team will also be raising your profile as well, as something that's really important within school. So also number 4, don't undertake tasks that others should or could be doing. So again, it's really easy to go, oh, just give me that IEP or one plan, I'll just sort it out for you. And if I think about my 12 members of staff, in fact, I met one of them for coffee the other day on last Friday, and I'm like, oh, you were the worst in my school. Male, I have to add, sorry guys. This guy was the worst for paperwork in my school, and I have to say, and I said to him, oh, trying to get paperwork out of teachers, you were the most challenging. He's a really good friend of mine and we get on really well, but I definitely found that building those relationships with members of staff and working out what the best pressure to apply on them to get paperwork out of them was really, really important. So again, don't undertake tasks yourself that other people should be doing. Tip number 5 is sharing your send list weekly. So even if there's no change, just send it out again. In a big school, I found when I worked in a big school that actually the list would change every week. So we'd have traveller children, for example, that would come and go. We'd have children joining, children leaving, and it was never the same list. And I used to keep sort of a running information about what was happening with each child. So that meant that the whole senior leadership team were aware of what was happening. So that raised the profile as well of inclusion within school. Number 6, explaining to them what you are doing. So, if you've got one of those leaders who just lets you run with it and doesn't micromanage you, this is absolutely amazing when that happens, but just be transparent about what you're doing and just sort of give them a heads up, I'm doing this, 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 and this, and just let me know if there's anything specific you want to do, because I just find that if I've been given free rein, that's fine with me, and that's definitely how I prefer to do things. But then I think, well, actually, I need to make sure that I am accountable for my time, and so therefore just reporting back to your line manager or head teacher is quite important, really. Number 7, supporting them in understanding SEND. So I've met lots of heads. I can loosely put them into some different categories. So there's ones that understand SEND really well, and they might even have a SENCO qualification, and they might have been the SENCO previous, for example. There's ones that have no idea at all, but they're happy to be led by you, also good. There's some that have no idea, but they're quite old-fashioned, and they're a bit of a nightmare, to be honest, because sometimes their ideas of inclusion and mine don't really mix. And there's others that think they understand SEND really, really well, but actually have no idea. And these are definitely the worst to work with. And I have to say, when I worked with one of these, I didn't work with them for very long. So there's definitely that question mark of whether it's the right job for you if your idea of inclusion and theirs do not align. So that's also something for consideration. So we've also got tip number 8, holding them to account when needed as well. So good heads should be able to listen to you, listen to your ideas, and move forward. But some of them don't find that very easy. So I think it's always good to say your piece and to give your opinion, but also be mindful of the hierarchy of the school. And I always find as long as I've said my opinion, then my conscience is clear that then if the head makes a decision that I'm not agreeing with, then at least I've kind of put my views forward. So that's quite important to me. Okay, so the next section is all about high quality teaching and why that is important. So knowing your classroom and teachers, tip number 9. So being visible around the school is really important, and regularly visit those classes. Staff will welcome you into their lessons if they feel that you're supporting the students in classes. And if you're managing to extract a pupil that's causing some difficulties to the teacher and do some work with them separately, or if you go and sit with them and support them with their learning, and it's just all those things, if you're visible around the school as far as possible, building those relationships, that's really useful as well. Number 10, identifying training needs for individual staff. So this is really useful, and it might just be a question of providing them staff meeting time for them to go and look at their individual needs and to research those, and for them to, I don't know, even just have a look on YouTube and get some training from there, ideally quality training from YouTube. So it's always a good idea to check it's quality training, but there's plenty of free stuff available. Of course, I run webinars as well if you want to pay for something, and yeah, just making sure that it's bespoke CPD, and there's a lot more opportunities to do that these days than there ever has been. So taking advantage of that and giving staff the opportunity to do that where possible as well. Number 11, identifying needs of high needs pupils in class. So just check that those with EHCPs are getting not only the universal provision that they need, but also anything on section F is also being provided as well. So I know where in classes where there's good teaching and learning, this kind of happens automatically, but where there isn't, quite often those children, they're getting kind of the section F stuff in terms of their interventions and extra support, but sometimes the basics aren't in place to start with that will make everybody's life easier. And that leads on to tip number 12, making sure there's excellent high quality teaching across the school, really. Just making that you're sure that your universal provision is really good and what you're offering as a school is really secure as well. So things like dyslexia friendly classrooms, it's just going to suit everybody, because if that's in place, then it's highly likely then teaching is going to be good or better anyway. And I expect you can think about within your schools the pockets of school of staff where it's better than others. And I've certainly worked in places where children have ended up on the SEND list because they've had sort of 2, maybe 3 years of really dodgy teaching. So a lot of schools use interventions to plug those gaps, but actually with high quality teaching, it would have been prevented to start with. So it can be very challenging in schools if children are subjected to slightly dodgy teaching for a number of years. So that's not ideal. Okay, so moving on. We have next one, we're on number 13. Oh, there it is. So number 13, the out of office automatic email reply. So just making sure that in holidays and when you're away from school, or particularly if you're part-time, maybe you might want an out of office reply. I've also got in my signature line that I'm only there on Tuesdays, so there might be a delay in answering emails. I mean, in reality, I do check them throughout the week, and I do like to get back to people, but it's really good just to make sure that those parents particularly are not expecting you to get back to them straight away, because that's quite annoying, isn't it? Those parents have those unreasonable expectations of you. Your school might even have a policy that says 48 hours. It sort of depends on where you're working, really. And that goes for senior leaders as well. You might have senior leaders that kind of email you at midnight. I mean, do they expect to reply? They shouldn't do. So it's just a question of when you choose to pick up your emails and send your emails as well, just to be mindful of that, really. So number 14 is developing resilience to challenging conversations. So just thinking about those parents that come in and shout at you. Quite often they shout at the office staff first. So I've had a few situations where my office staff are like, oh, I can't stand talking to that parent. They're so abrasive. They're just, they don't like anything we say back to them. They're just really angry the whole time. And having had a few conversations with that parent, I know where they're coming from, but actually it's just the way that parent speaks. So actually they don't really speak unless they're shouting. So it's just also just a question of what that parent's like normally, how they're used to communicating, and also how they've been communicated with, as a child growing up themselves, about what they're used to. So getting parents on side in that way is really good, but also remembering that you don't go at work to be abused by parents. So getting senior leadership support where you can as well. At number 15 is working with your LA. Don't take no for an answer. So has your EHCP been rejected? You need to get the law on your side and find the relevant quotations from the law and send it back and say, look, the law says that this child needs to be looked at for an EHCNA and needs assessment. So the law is on your side there. So don't take no for an answer. If you're not happy with an EHCP banding, reject it and say why. Send them a costed provision map, appeal everything, and make the LA pay for everything in section F. And ideally, just going to make a positive nuisance of yourself. As long as you're polite and maintain professionalism, if they know who you are, then that's a positive thing. It definitely pays off. So number 16, always be prepared to show parents a costed provision map for children with EHCPs as well. If my child has an EHCP, which I'm trying to get at the moment for him, once that happens, then I really want the school to let me know what they're spending the money on, because as a parent, I think it's quite important to know where that money's been spent. And I think a lot of the time, the schools that don't want to give that costed provision maps out, particularly head teachers, are the ones who kind of know that they're not spending the right amount of money on the pupils, rightly or wrongly. So, and I appreciate you get those pupils with HCPs who aren't as high need as they once were, so perhaps less can be spent on them potentially. And also, of course, resources and funding is really difficult in schools at the moment, so that's another reason. But again, everything on section F should be accountable for, and it should be provided by the school. And if you can't provide it, go back to your local authority and just get some more money out of them, really, because everything on that needs to be provided. And parents need to know where that money is being spent. Okay, so number 17. So every teacher is a teacher of SEND. So just keep reminding staff of their roles and responsibilities, because you are the coordinator, you're not the doer. And of course, they're going to need your help and support at times. But actually, overall, you're not responsible for those people outcomes. They are responsible. So you need to help and support the people to get their outcomes, but the teachers are still responsible for the planning, the preparation, interventions, and tracking the progress of their pupils as well. So that's useful to know. So share this as regularly as you can. Top tip number 18 is thinking about building relationships and holding people to account. So especially if you're new to the school, can be a bit of a challenge in order to build that. And I found going from class teacher to SENCO a challenge in that when I was a class teacher, I had teams. So I had like 3-year classes in the year group. We had people to bounce ideas off. I was in like little friendly WhatsApp groups. We used to meet for drinks. Suddenly you become SENCO and you're only one in a school. You're on your own a little bit. So building those new relationships can be quite daunting. And but if you build those relationships with people, it is much easier to hold people to account, because you can do it in a more friendly way. And of course, you still get the odd person who can be a little bit of a challenge, and you might need to get more leadership on side in order to help you. And I don't like holding people to account for things. And if I'm honest, it's just not a comfortable thing to do. But when you're in that position in a school, it is a skill that you do have to sort of continue to home in on and develop in order to support staff and whole school development moving forward. Number 19, have systems in place for concerned pupils. So I used to wander around with post-its on my lanyard and in corridors, and when everyone used to catch me, I'd be like, okay, I'm just going to write it on my post-it on my lanyard to remember that. But actually, I found out that a lot of the issues can be solved by that universal provision and high quality teaching. So therefore, if there's a pupil and you get caught in the corridor and you say, oh, my child in my class hasn't got, is not sitting still, and you're thinking, well, have you tried a brain break? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? And they're all those basic things that you should be providing as a classroom teacher anyway. Then it's a bit difficult for that conversation to happen. You're just wasting your time unless you've got that structure in place. So if you have a concern form, then that means that you can ideally get the teacher to think about what high quality teaching strategies that they've already done. And when those have been tried and it still hasn't worked, then that's the point that you get involved and go and do your observation and things. So, but of course, in order to maintain relationships with class teachers, you are going to be helpful. And because you're going to be in and out of class as much as possible, you'll probably know which child that they're talking about as well and can offer some advice. So it's kind of a bit of a give or take situation there. And number 20 is praise more and more praise. So especially LSAs. And of course, you need praise as well. So if you're not getting any praise, it is a massively thankless task. So just, I highlight the fact that perhaps praise in the whole school culture needs to be considered, because if you're not getting any praise and nobody else is getting any praise, it's not going to be a very nice place to work. But just making sure that you're giving out enough praise as well where it's due. So your LSAs, for example, of course, your pupils, class teachers, people that are doing things well, and even your head teacher too, if they do something well, because pretty sure no one praises them either. So it's that difficulty, isn't it? And just making sure the praise is sincere as well. So I remember someone saying to someone in the staff meeting once, oh, well done for tidying out the music cupboard. And the lady who was the music coordinator was like, well, I'll just do that anyway. So again, just make sure it's good praise where praise is due, and just make sure that it's part of your whole school culture to feel valued and appreciated. So there we go, 20 top tips for you. It's a bit of a whistle-stop tour, wasn't it? There's an awful lot more in the book, of course, but that was just a few highlights for you. So thank you very much for joining me, and back to Asha.
Thank you so much for that, Lynn. That was great. So I was having a look at who to pick for our free book and the free webinar. It was three people, wasn't it?
That's
Yeah.
the 3 webinars, yeah.
Yep. So I thought for the free book, I have chosen Zuri. So well done, Zuri. So I'm going to send you a free book. I don't know what would be best if I put my email address in the chat, and then
Yeah,
Zuri, if you
lovely.
contact me just with your postal address, and then I'll get that sent out to you. So if I just send that
I'll
over
put my
now.
email in the chat as well. And then for whoever gets webinars, if you email me, and then you can choose which one you'd like.
So and then with the free webinar, we've got Nicola. Um, then we've got Naomi and Natalie.
Brilliant, all the ends.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh yeah, just have a look on the My CPD. I'll put my website on there as well. So that's my website if you haven't seen my blog already. And I'll find my CPD details as well, just searching for that. And then I'll put that in the chat as well, and you can just have a look at what webinars I run and choose which one you'd like, and I can send you a link for that. Well, it's amazing for you to join us. Is there any Q&A, or is everyone happy with with everything and no Q&A?
There weren't any questions while you were speaking,
Okay,
but if anyone has any questions now, then feel free to ask.
everyone's exhausted, I reckon. Go and get yourself some gin. Not if you're still at school, of course. Go first.
Yeah, one other thing just to mention is that there is a Christmas sale on currently on the Bloomsbury website. So Lynn's book that she's been talking about has got 30% off if you wanted to buy it from the Bloomsbury website.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much, Asha, for joining me today from Bloomsbury. It's great to have somebody to facilitate as well. And thank you to all the participants for coming. And I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. And if you're not on the SENCO already, come and take a look at the SENCO, because there's lots of ranting over there for SENCO wellbeing. And yeah, just have a look at those little links, and hope you enjoy the book. And yeah, if you've already got the book, then a review would be fantastic as well, because I'd like to build up a few reviews. If you hated it, just email me directly and tell me. If you loved it, then our review would be great. I think that's the way to do it, isn't it? So thank you very much. You're free to go and enjoy your evening.